The snow had barely settled on the roof of my secluded cabin when I heard the distant crunch of tires on the gravel road. It was unusual. Rarely did anyone venture out this far, not without reason. I pulled my wool coat tighter around me and squinted through the frost-covered window. A figure was trudging through the snow toward my cabin, shoulders hunched against the bitter wind. The first thing that came to mind was annoyance. Intruders in my sanctuary were the last thing I wanted. But there was something oddly familiar about her gait, something that nudged at the edges of my memory. Before I could think it through, the doorbell rang, echoing sharply through the empty cabin. I opened the door to find a woman in her late 20s, eyes wide with what I guessed was panic, or maybe indignation. "Hi," she said, breath misting in the cold air. I think someone's squatting in this cabin. I called the cops." Her words hit me like a winter storm. My cabin. My cabin. How could someone, anyone, be standing here accusing me? I barely held back a laugh. "Squatting?" I asked, my voice low, measured. "This is my place. I live here." Her expression shifted from indignation to confusion, then skepticism. "You live here? But I called the police. The officer said someone was—" I cut her off. "I'm the owner. Been here for years. You must have the wrong cabin." Her face fell, and I noticed a flicker of something, fear, or was it recognition? There was a hesitation in her posture, a subtle pause that suggested she was reconsidering her assumptions. I didn't press, not yet. Some truths, I've learned, need timing. After a tense silence, she introduced herself as Clara. "I just moved into the area. This cabin was supposed to be abandoned. I didn't know—" "Abandoned?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You really think any place like this, hidden away in the woods, would be left to rot?" My words were calm, but inside, my mind raced. There was more to Clara than she realized. Her connection to this cabin ran far deeper than her recent move suggested. By the time the officers arrived, she was babbling an apology, insisting she had no idea. I watched as the patrolman nodded politely, taking her side while ignoring mine. It was amusing. If only she knew. This cabin, these walls, even the firewood stocked for winter, all of it was tied to her life in ways she couldn't begin to understand. The truth, the real truth, was that her existence had been intertwined with mine long before she set foot here. And I had always been watching, waiting, making sure that when the time came, I would reveal it on my terms. As she stomped her boots on the porch, muttering under her breath, I felt a quiet satisfaction. She had no clue. Not yet. The next morning, the forest was silent, except for the occasional crack of ice under the weight of a wandering deer. I sipped my coffee by the window, keeping one eye on Clara's little cottage at the edge of the clearing. She hadn't left yet, not that I minded. Watching her fumble with her own sense of control was entertaining. I knew she thought the cabin incident was a one-time misunderstanding, but I had other plans. My mind wandered back to why she was really here. Her arrival wasn't random, not for someone like her. Every detail of her life, her past, her family history, even her career choices, was linked to this land. I'd spent years studying her, observing the subtle patterns, the way she moved, the people she trusted. She belonged here, but she didn't know it yet. By mid-morning, she ventured out with a notebook in hand, apparently documenting the disturbances she'd imagined. I chuckled softly to myself. She had no idea I could hear her. Walls have ears in these woods, and this cabin has secrets she couldn't dream of uncovering. I decided it was time to make contact. I pulled on my boots and stepped into the snow, leaving no tracks that didn't already exist. When she saw me approaching, she froze, her notebook trembling in her hands. "Morning," I said casually, as if we were neighbors passing by. I thought I'd introduce myself properly. "I'm the owner of the cabin." Her eyes widened, and I saw the familiar flicker of panic again, but this time it was tempered with curiosity. "Right, the cabin," she said, attempting to regain composure. "I, didn't mean any trouble. None taken," I replied smoothly. "But it seems we need to clear up a few things, about the land and about your connection to it." Her expression shifted. She tilted her head, confused. "My connection?" "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "You don't realize it yet, but your life, your family, your roots, all of it ties back here, to this place. I can show you if you're willing." Her hands clenched the notebook like a shield. "I don't know what you mean. How could—" "You will," I interrupted gently, sensing her resistance. "I've been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. You're here now, so maybe that moment is today." For the first time, she seemed uncertain, even vulnerable. That vulnerability was a door, and I had the key. But I didn't force it. Not yet. Some truths need to be discovered, not imposed. She took a cautious step back. "This sounds insane. You can't just—" "I can," I said softly, "because you're part of something bigger, something that starts here, in this cabin, in these woods, and whether you accept it or not, it has always been waiting for you." Her gaze flicked around, hesitant. I could see the questions forming in her mind, the ones she didn't yet have the courage to ask aloud. And I knew in my careful way that soon she would. That evening, the forest was shrouded in mist, the moon barely cutting through the fog like a faint silver blade. Clara had returned to her little cottage, but I wasn't done yet. I waited until the air grew colder, and then I made my way over, careful to remain unseen until the right moment. This wasn't about confrontation, it was about revelation. Through the thin walls, I could hear her voice, quiet and trembling, reciting fragments from her family journals she had recently discovered. She didn't know it yet, but those journals had been left intentionally, as breadcrumbs leading her here. She was following a path that I had long prepared. I stepped onto her porch. "You really shouldn't be afraid of this place," I said softly. The sound of my voice made her start, her notebook clattering to the floor. I told you, you can't just—" Her words faltered, her voice barely a whisper. "I know," I said, kneeling to retrieve her notebook. "But sometimes the truth doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes it shows up whether we're ready or not." She swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and the shadows of the trees surrounding her cottage. "What truth?" she asked, voice shaking. "The truth that your life, your entire existence is rooted here. Not metaphorically, literally," I said. "Your family's history, the land you live on, the very blood in your veins, it all traces back to this cabin, to me." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. A shiver ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from the realization settling in her bones. "You think this is insane?" I continued, standing and gesturing toward the cabin that had been my sanctuary for years. "But it's not. Every wall, every beam, every corner of this cabin holds pieces of your life, waiting for you to recognize them. And now you're here. Finally." She sank into the chair on her porch, staring at me as if trying to decide whether to run or listen. Why me?" she whispered. "Why now?" "Because it was always meant to be," I replied. "You were supposed to find your way here eventually. The land knew, the forest knew, and I knew. But you had to believe you were alone until now. That's the way the story works." She was silent for a long moment, and I let her absorb it. Then she spoke, almost to herself. "So, everything I've ever known, it was all leading to this cabin?" "Yes," I said simply. "And whether you choose to accept it or not, this cabin, this life, belongs to you, as much as it belongs to me." Her gaze shifted to the snow-dusted roof, the glowing windows, the smoke curling from the chimney. There was wonder there, fear, and a glimmer of recognition, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. "You've been waiting for me?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. I have, I said. And now that you're here, it's time for the next chapter. Morning came quietly, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Clara hadn't slept. I could tell by the way she stood outside her cottage, wrapped in a blanket, staring at my cabin like it might suddenly speak. In a way, it already had. I checked the records, she said when I approached. Her voice was steadier now, but her eyes betrayed her unease. The land registry, old wills, names I recognized from my family tree. She swallowed. They all lead back here. I nodded. I knew you would look. You didn't lie, she admitted. About the land, about my family. She hesitated. But you left out something important. I waited. You've been managing it all, she said. The trust, the taxes, the maintenance. My parents thought everything was handled by a faceless estate company. That was you. Yes, I replied. Your grandparents set it up before they disappeared. They trusted me to protect it until you were old enough to find it yourself. Her breath caught. So when I called the cops on you? You were calling them on the caretaker, I finished calmly. Not the intruder. She let out a humorless laugh and rubbed her face. I spent my whole life thinking I owned nothing. No roots. No place that was truly mine. She looked up at me. And all this time, it was waiting. We walked toward the cabin together. I handed her a thick folder, documents, keys, handwritten letters sealed decades ago. She opened one and froze. That's my grandmother's handwriting, she whispered. She wanted you to have answers, I said, but not before you were ready. Tears welled in her eyes, though she didn't let them fall. You could have told me sooner. I could have, I agreed, but ownership isn't just paperwork. It's responsibility, understanding, choice. I met her gaze. Now it's yours to make. She stood in silence for a long time, then handed one of the keys back to me. I don't want to do this alone, she said. Not yet. I allowed myself a small smile. That was always an option. The cabin door opened with a familiar creak, but this time she stepped inside first. The place felt different, lighter somehow, as if it had been waiting for her permission to exhale. Later, when she stood by the window watching the forest sway, she spoke without turning around. I really did think you were stealing my cabin. I chuckled softly. Most people don't realize what belongs to them until they try to take it from someone else. She nodded slowly. My whole life. And I had no clue. Outside, the snow began to melt, revealing the land beneath, unchanged, patient, enduring, just like the truth. Enjoying this story of secrets, suspense, and hidden connections? Hit that subscribe button to uncover more gripping tales like this. Give this a like if the mystery kept you hooked, and drop a comment below. What would you do if you discovered your life was tied to a place you never knew existed?